Compassion to me is realizing the interconnectedness with all beings, the trees, the plants, the animals.
Compassion is a proactive desire to really understand the other, to listen to them in a way that allows them to share their truth with you.
Compassion is very connected with an open heart, that we are ready to face and to see what is happening on this globe.
Compassion is a willingness to see and be sensitive to the suffering of others, and also a deep commitment and willingness to do something about it to alleviate the suffering.
Right now, the world is going through so many challenges, and so, according to many spiritual traditions, this is part of the plan. Conflict is necessary before true unity and harmony is achieved. So, this is inevitable. One cannot avoid the conflict. The question is, can we engage conflict in a very compassionate way? It doesn't mean being submissive or being wishy-washy, but it means to exercise strict love, which is courageous love, and that's one aspect of love.
I think part of what drives everyone crazy are the feelings of separateness and a kind of desperate attempt to find something that makes me feel connected. And I think even a lot of the most criminal behavior actually is driven by that. We need an empathic revolution, in a sense, and have to come together as a world community to address the problems we now face, the multiple and interlocking crises that we face. And we simply can't afford not to be. We can't afford not to be compassionate.
Really, the first step of compassion is being willing to be present with suffering. You know, if you think about why we tune out homeless people on the street or people around the world who are suffering, it's because it's hard to take in the fact that suffering is present. So really the first step of compassion is mindfulness. But really for it to be compassion, it's like, okay, I'm in the presence of suffering. I'm strong enough, courageous enough to be with it. My heart opens in response so that I care about the suffering. And then there's this desire to do what you can to help.
Compassion is the ground of ethics, right? You will feel a natural inclination to ethical behavior without a rule book if you're feeling compassionate. You don't want to harm anything. You're very, very careful.
So we teach compassion and peace building, whether at home or at school, I believe, by beginning to imagine the lives, motives, and heart of those who seem very different. This looks like a parent perhaps saying, how do you think he feels or she feels, or how would you feel if, or oh, check this out, this is a story from a place, a perspective, a country, a culture that is very different from our own. Let's be curious and learn about it. I think that those things are sort of natural conduits to compassion.
Human beings evolved in the context of caring for each other, which is kind of the good news, that it's the natural reaction to be compassionate. I think our lack of compassion that we see in the world is due to a lot of factors like stress, like scarcity, like competition, which actually aren't as natural to human beings.
There is an East Asian tradition of compassion being a default setting of the mind, right? And people like the Dalai Lama and the Zen practitioners talk about the Buddha mind or the big mind, that once you get rid of all the chatter in your head, you drop down into this feeling about the world that is compassion. really intuitive, right? If you're in a neighborhood and people are kind, that neighborhood's going to be stronger, the kids are going to do better, and you will fare better. But Darwin was really unusual in the survival of the kindest hypothesis. And other scholars, like Herbert Spencer, translated Darwin and said he's all about the survival of the fittest, to be ruthless and competitive and Machiavellian. And Darwin really saw it really differently. He felt like lots of strains of Buddhism that compassion is the strongest setting of the human mind.
Maintaining compassionate attitude through the day is a practice. We need to live with this completeness in ourselves by being mindful at all given point of time. When you're able to do that, then you're able to live with that compassion all through from the time you wake up in the morning. Like what we do is when we wake up in the morning, the first thing is we touch the ground and say, Mother Earth, forgive me, I'll be stepping onto you, carrying me through the day.
The most fundamental aspect of compassion refers to wishing for an altruistic aspect of love for all others and for them to be happy and to be free of suffering. Cultivating compassion, I think, is something that is taught in all spiritual traditions and also non-spiritual traditions. There are many ways of doing this, but there are very, very simple but very profound ways of cultivating compassion. And one profound way is to just simply start thinking about people that you care deeply about. And to focus on such people in the morning or in the evening or throughout the day, but preferably when you're resting in the morning or after you wake up, but before you go to sleep. And to offer intentions of happiness and joy and success for those individuals. And then to step by step expand the list of those people that you pray for. If there's something blocking another person from generating that pure sense of love and kindness towards others, they're suffering. And all we can do is take action by generating the love and kindness for those people and the people around us. And slowly but surely you are affecting not only yourself and the small circle around you, but the idea is you are impacting the world. Your actions affect the people around you, then their actions will affect the people around them, and it continues on because of this interdependence that we all have with each other. And in fact, I often tell people that mindfulness or meditation practice is not really a practice with the goal of sitting in a corner on a cushion with your eyes closed, but in fact, it's intended to improve our human connection with others and then dissolve the distinction so that we all feel connected to everyone else. So you would never do anything, harm or violence towards anyone else because it would just be doing harm unto yourself. And those are like basic moral, ethical tenets that you see universally across all religions. So you can almost see this as a universal ethic that you're generating by producing or cultivating compassion.
How could compassion be good for you when you're sacrificing and exposing yourself to vulnerability? One of the ways that compassion can be strong is it kind of contagiously spreads to other people so that they'll start to feel compassion, right? And then you've got this little network of people who are feeling compassion and more likely to share and cooperate. And there are really neat studies that show that compassion is contagious. We know this intuitively, but it's good to have the science to back it up, which is that, if I give some resources to you, let's say I volunteer for you and I help you out, you are moved by my generosity and kindness. You are more likely to give more resources to the next person you interact with, right? Even though I'm not there. And then that person is more likely to give resources to the next person she or he interacts with. So my generosity and kindness is influencing interactions that are 3 degrees away, even though I'm not there, I don't know what's going on. So it's a really contagious emotion, which is good news.
Well, compassion is quite contagious. And so when you're sort of broadcasting calm and ease and generosity and understanding and compassion, it allows that to wake up in another person if it's going to be, if it's possible.
What many people don't appreciate is the healing power of compassion. And there is an increasing body of evidence that demonstrates, as an example, when you touch another person, if you will, in a kind way, it affects many aspects of their physiology. When you talk with a soothing voice, and oftentimes when you're simply present and holding someone's hand.
These were some of the most important findings in the kind of the compassion literature, which is that scientists started to discover that if I help and practice compassion later in life, 60s and 70s, I live longer, right? And this was work by Stephanie Brown and others that started to show if I volunteer 12, 14 hours a week or more, I'm less likely to die, right? I have a more robust nervous system. And so that tells us that just practicing compassion or loving kindness has a lot of effects on the body of fewer symptoms, better sleep, less bodily pain, a better cardiovascular profile, a better immune system response or profile, and that ends up accumulating into this increase in life expectancy that the studies documented. Compassion, we've now shown in 10 studies, activates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is really good for your cardiovascular profile, your digestive process, your immune system response. So it's really ironic that acts of sacrifice out of compassion are actually one of the best things you can do for your body.
When someone acts with compassionate intention, it takes them out of the threat mode and puts them into the rest and digest mode. Your heart rate variability increases, your expression of inflammatory hormones decreases, your immune system is boosted, your heart rate decreases, your blood pressure decreases, and even if you look at over time, the length of your telomeres increase, which are the ends of your genes that are associated with an increase in longevity. So on every level, when you practice compassion with intention, it has a huge, huge positive physiologic effect. We have a lot of practices in our culture for being compassionate. It's built into our culture. Self-compassion is not, right? And so that's why we need exercises like Kristen Neff's, just like, here's how you train your mind into being easy on the self.
In order to sustain giving compassion to others without burning out, it absolutely is necessary to have self-compassion. If you're just giving and giving and giving and treating yourself horribly, you aren't going to have the emotional resources needed to continue giving. We also find that when people learn to be more self-compassionate, it also increases their compassion for others.
Oftentimes, people are in an inner struggle, or if you will, a war within themselves, because they have these inner demons that they continue to struggle with. And when you utilize self-compassion, where you accept who you are, you accept the different aspects of yourself, and you can sit with yourself and be okay with that, then that allows you to change the lens at which you view the world. And you go from a lens that oftentimes is judgmental and critical to one that is much more understanding, because you recognize our common humanity. You recognize the reality that unless we treat the other as ourselves, as a species, we won't survive.
actually a couple very simple techniques to be more self-compassionate. A very easy way to access self-compassion is through physical touch. If you actually take the time to find what type of touch feels soothing and supportive to me, and people are really different. Many people like putting both hands over their heart, the warmth of their hands, and that makes them feel comforted and safe. Some people like to put a fist over their heart with a hand over it. It's kind of the power stance. No matter what's happening mentally, if you can just give yourself that touch, your body responds, your body relaxes, your body gets the message, hey, I'm here for you, I care. What you say to yourself is also very important, what you say and how you say it. So I tell people a very easy way to think about how to speak self-compassionately is just think, what if I had a really dear friend who was struggling in the exact same way I was? What would I say to them? It's okay, I'm here for you, I love you unconditionally, right? Any messages like that that we would say to a friend, we can just say to ourselves. So if you can give yourself a kind message of support with a warm tone internally, it's very powerful in terms of conveying messages of compassion. One of the strongest findings of the research is that self-compassion is very strongly related to mental well-being. It reduces all sorts of negative mind states, things like depression, anxiety, shame. It's also linked to positive mind states, things like greater happiness, greater life satisfaction, greater optimism. It never ceases to amaze me. It's almost like magic, you know. It's the magic of love, is what it is. I can say that as a scientist. Really, we got data to show it. The magic of love.
It's interesting because sometimes people feel from beating themselves up so much that they have nothing to offer. And I use the analogy, each of us has a spark, and no matter what happens, there's just a bit of that spark that's always there. But if we can teach an individual to be compassionate to themselves and understand that within them is the spark, and that spark can be turned into a flame by caring for others and being compassionate. And the nature of that is what lights the world.
There are so many peace builders who are familiar to us, like, you know, Gandhi and King and Mandela and so forth. But there are countless others who we do not know, whose names we've never heard, people who are in the margins or in the shadows doing really important work in their communities. So my hope is that we begin to act as localists in that way. We begin connecting those local points of light. I used to think that courage was really about jumping out of planes, which I did a time or two, unbelievably, and now I see courage as something that is really about leaning into our discomfort, working to engage the community around us, finding our leadership voice, whether that's quiet or charismatic, and walking down a long dusty road, even though we don't know where it will lead, and even though we're thirsty and hungry, and we want to sit down.
And it's easy to be overwhelmed by the horrific news that we see on the media. But coming up like green shoots through concrete are all these initiatives that are based on compassion. And they're all over the world. All over the world.
La compasión aparece, digamos, naturalmente en un ser cuando él aprende a amarse a sí mismo, a respetar a los demás, a valorar cada detalle que la vida tiene. Desde que nace, si aprende a respirar, aprende a ver la naturaleza, la tierra, lo que hay en ella, entonces ahí nace una compasión por cuidar y proteger lo que hay alrededor de cada ser humano, porque cada ser humano tiene la oportunidad y el don de tener compasión por lo que hay a su alrededor.
Maybe an advice I can give through, based on my experience, is that we need to push ourselves to get out of our comfort zone. And that's the piece that is the hardest.
Me personally, I love to go to crisis areas with small groups to face the pain. We have to learn to face the pain. As long as we don't face the pain in the world, we shut our door and we don't want to know.
It's hard to maintain compassion for these people who are trying to hurt us, basically taking away our water and basically our right to, sustain ourselves, live. And it was hard, but we maintain compassion because they are also people. They have no more power than we do. And they have children just like us. They have lives, mothers, fathers. And I think at the end of the day, we're all humans, and that's the only thing that we can really say we all relate to.
You know, when you hear about what's going on in the world and it really touches you, you want to run out there and do something about it. And when I came in contact with the vision of healing biotopes, it wasn't about trying to solve the fires and the suffering all over the world, but actually to focus my compassionate response into a almost strategic, intentional, systemic response. And this is where I'm investing my energy now. There is a possibility for global system change, creating models that come from compassion and then offer systemic response.
Cooperation is the most successful model for humans, and now cooperation is even needed more. Why? Because we have more problems that need an interconnected answer, an interdependent action. Global climate change, wars, these are not things that individuals can stop by themselves, but as a group of individuals, we can stop it, we can make a difference. So cooperation is necessary, and how you get that going is through compassion. And compassion is that flint, is that spark that makes cooperation happen. Let's seed compassion in as many places as possible, from grammar school classrooms to healthcare settings to criminal justice reform. And I think what you would see is, and there are a lot of data that back this up, that people are more civil, they're more trusting of each other, families do better, and society is healthier. And some of these violence problems or healthcare problems or criminal mass incarceration in the United States would really change dramatically.
All of us within us has the ability to, at least once a day, improve the lot or the life of another by being compassionate. Simply in the actions that you do every day, there doesn't have to be a reason you're kind. You're kind just because. And of course, all contained by love.
Everything starts with a thought in our head. You can think about what you think about, and you can consciously change one angry thought and turn it into a loving thought every day. By doing this, you will positively impact yourself, those around you, and through the ripple effect, you will make